Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the hashtag Vancouver Survival Guide. I am your host today, Mike Zaremba, and as per usual, we are podcasting here out of the Vancouver Real Studios, out of Float House, 70 West Cordova Street. So the Vancouver Survival Guide is sponsored to you by Float House. So if you haven't heard of flotation therapy, check out floathouse.ca and maybe get educated a little bit. So the hashtag Vancouver Survival Guide is all about supporting you and bringing on people from the city who are experts in different fields or are connected to different communities, and trying to not just help you survive in Vancouver, but to actually get you thriving in the city. So we hope that this is a piece of multifaceted content. We have different themes for each one, and we hope that you're getting a lot out of it. So thanks for joining us. And today we are going to dive into the topic of transportation a little bit in this city. So obviously, living in any city, you know, you're going to have different challenges and opportunities with transportation needs. And, you know, what do you get a car? Do you go car share? Do you walk? Do you bike? Do you take SkyTrain or public transit? There's a lot of options. But today we have someone joining us from Hub Cycling. That's Laura. Sorry, I don't want to mess this up. There it is, Laura Jane. Oh my God, that was brutal. But Laura Jane, thank you so much for coming on the hashtag Vancouver Survival Guide.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So Hub Cycling, you are the Director of Corporate Engagement and Events there. And so first of all, I know you're squeezing us in because this is Bike to Work Week. Yeah. So I really appreciate your time. And but can you kind of talk to us, first of all, if someone's never heard of Hub Cycling or Hub, can you kind of give us in a nutshell what that's all about and what Hub is? Yeah,
so Hub Cycling is Metro Vancouver's cycling organization. Our main mission is to get more people cycling more often because cycling helps to create happier, healthier, and more connected communities. Cool. We've been around now almost 20 years. So we were founded in 1998. The main focus then was on improving infrastructure. It was all volunteer, very grassroots. About a decade later, we started to introduce some programming as well. So events like Bike to Work Week, which actually is in its 10th anniversary now.
Oh, wow.
Which is really exciting.
Very exciting.
And education, so teaching adults as well as children and schools how to bike confidently and safely in the city. Cool. And since then, you know, we've grown quite substantially. We rebranded to Hub Cycling. We used to be the Vancouver Area Cycling Coalition.
That's a mouthful.
Yeah, it was a bit long. So Hub Cycling is our long version.
Cool.
So people tend to know us by that name now. And we have kind of three main areas now. So we still have the action side. We partner with municipalities as well as the provincial government to try and make cycling safer. We also do education. So we do teach thousands of kids each year in schools. It's also Bike to School Week right now as well.
Okay.
And we also do events. So that's kind of my main thing, Bike to Work Week. We have some new events we've recently introduced, like Bike to Shop Days, Bike the Night. We do a Bike Awards, Bike Fashion Show, things like that. Anything to basically motivate and encourage people to try cycling.
Absolutely. Cool. Yeah. And so it's a nonprofit organization, and I guess obviously it's all centered around bicycles and cycling and just getting that in there. Now, what to Hub's perspective is the main motivation of doing that? I'm sure it's got a couple different categories there, but what are the main reasons why Hub exists in your mind? Or
yeah.
Hub's mind?
I mean, I think the main reason is that, obviously cities, there are a lot of challenges in cities, affordability, sustainability, social isolation. There's so many different challenges that many cities, including Vancouver, face. And cycling really is, not the only solution, but part of the solution to build happier cities, to get outside and connect people, but also to ensure that you have, a more sustainable city, and also just a more, economically viable city. We can't have everybody drive in the city. There just isn't enough space and nobody would get anywhere. So it's part of just a solution to moving people around the city.
Yeah, and I think that's super effective to have a solution-oriented movement versus just highlighting, this is a problem and someone fix this. It's like, okay, well, what can we actually do? And I love how it seems to be a multi-faceted approach of it's good for one's personal health. It's good for environmental health, if you will, like our environment that we live in. more economical, and then the social element. I didn't really think about that, but I mean, it can be a very social thing, especially if you're biking with a friend or something. There's a lot into it.
There's a recent, actually, the city of Vancouver just recently released a cycling and walking report card. And one of the most interesting stats in there actually was on the fact that cycling and walking, you're far more likely to have a positive social interaction if you're cycling and walking for your commute or just for your trip. So, so that affects you. I think that affects people's well-being.
100%.
So it's important.
And it makes sense too, because I know when you're driving, like sometimes you're going quite fast and like you're in this very almost like reptilian part of our brain mode, because you got to be kind of alert and like you're driving. It's like it takes that kind of focus, I guess you could say, whereas walking and cycling, the fact that we're physically active and we're going to get engaged with our whole body, bringing us into our bodies, I guess you could say, it probably puts us into a different mind state. So a little bit more open, a little bit more like just jovial, if you will, cheerful, versus like kind of in this like a little more of a fight or flight stage in our cars. So that actually kind of makes a lot of sense too. It's really interesting. Definitely. So why did you get into this so passionately? Like what about it for you has taken you into Hub and just being so like engaged with bringing more cycling to communities?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, I started cycling about 12 years ago when I was living in Montreal and going to school there. And I never really thought about it apart from it was just the most convenient way to get around. And it was affordable. So I was a student, it was affordable, it was convenient. And I never really thought about it as more than that. At the time, Montreal was one of the leaders in North America. They did already have some great bike infrastructure that made it easy to get around. And really, until just a few years ago, until I moved to Vancouver, I never really thought about it much. I just always got around, not always, but often got around by bike. And so when I moved here, my background's mostly in events and working with nonprofits. I've always been interested in sustainability and community building. And then when this, when my this job posting came up, I thought it just sounded interesting. And then once you get into it, you start to really get into it, and it becomes kind of, it's hard to sometimes leave it at home because you end up, it's your.
Well, when you're that passionate about it, right? Like obviously it's intimately connected in your life, and it has been for a while now. Just cycling in general, but now it's taking on, it seems like a deeper depth of meaning for you, which and it makes a lot of sense. It seems really appropriate.
I've been very lucky. I'm lucky to be able to be a part of a hub and to help people, get healthier and around easier.
So we have a few more questions to get through, so I'm going to keep going through this. So like we were saying, you have Bike to Work Week going on right now. So can you tell us a bit about what that is and why it happens and just some more details there? Yeah,
so Bike to Work Week takes place twice a year in Metro Vancouver. The main goal of Bike to Work Week is to get more people cycling, not just new people, but also maybe people who have put their bikes away for the winter and haven't really taken them out, especially this winter because it was a bit rainy. And so it's just to motivate people. It's a lot of fun. It's entirely free. There's healthy competition between businesses, lots of prizes, incentives to get people riding. We're giving away a trip for 2 to Croatia, as well as a new bike each day, and there's over 70 free events set up this week where you can get free coffee and snacks and the whole thing. Another reason obviously to bike is just because it's often very enjoyable, and that's one of the reasons we try to push, and that you can have fun on your way to work. We're doing a free barbecue tomorrow as well for everyone who wants to come out. So it's the main goal is to get more people cycling. So far, we have about 1,500 who are brand new to cycling to work that have been taking part this week, which is really exciting. Over 10,000 other people have registered. And many more that don't necessarily register online, but we see, at the stations, and we can see the bike lanes are fuller. Events like this do work. And the most interesting thing is that we do follow-up surveys, a couple months after the event as well. And the people who were brand new to cycling, more than 2/3 of them are still biking at least once a week, after the event, which is huge. And we're not, you don't have to bike every day, for every trip. Like that's not what the message that we want to get out. But, a lot of trips, we can bike. And it's often more convenient and often more enjoyable. So, for those trips that, are convenient or that are, under 5 kilometers for a lot of people are very, very easy to bike. So,
very cool.
And we have other options, like you mentioned earlier, like car share for those other trips that maybe you don't feel comfortable biking. So, it's really exciting. we are, excited to see it grow. We're hoping to break a new record this spring.
Cool.
Yeah.
And so do you do bike to work weeks at any other times during the year?
So we do, So we do the spring one, and then we do a fall one as well, the end of October.
Nice.
And that's kind of challenge people to continue perhaps a little bit later into the winter months, because, weather can be a barrier, darkness can be a barrier. So to help them, a goal of the event too is just to simply provide resources, educational materials and tips, because, everyone's barriers are a bit different. And so we can help answer as many questions that people have, and get them moving around the city.
Well, it makes sense. Yeah. During that time, someone was kind of like, got into the habit, say, during the spring and summer, but then, we're getting into different weather season, and that faces, like you said, different challenges. So having some resources and education for them to like, no, actually, you know what? It's not that bad. You just got to be a little bit more cautious with this, and here's what you do. So I got to ask you, when you were living in Montreal, like we know Montreal winters are dramatically more intense than Vancouver winters. Were you biking year round there?
I did. I didn't bike every day, some days, but I have memories of biking in the snow sometimes. It was just because it was so fast compared to other means, but I also took the metro and, and walked. So,
cool. So it can be done though.
It can be done.
Right? If they can do it in Montreal, we can do it in Vancouver.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, if there's any climate that can capitalize on, well, if there's any environment that can capitalize on their climate, it's us probably, right?
Definitely, yeah. And most of the time, like even if the weather says it's going to rain one day, most of the time it's not all day. Unfortunately, the weather, they always kind of default to rain, but oftentimes, half the day is sunny. So it's a matter of sometimes finding those breaks. And obviously, if you have a flexible schedule and job, it's easier at times.
Totally.
But usually, it's not super heavy rain most of the time. So.
Yeah, I mean, I look at people that do ride year round. You can see them there. They got, they have their system. They got their gear. They have the big mud guards, so they're not going to get completely like wet from their back tire. And they got their gear on, and they seem like they're having a great time regardless if it's pouring rain and cold outside. They just because you get warm when you're cycling, and
it's fine. And I'm the worst. I usually just wear a raincoat. I don't even wear my heels in a raincoat, and usually most of the time on a light drizzle, it's totally fine.
Nice.
So
that's awesome. Cool. So cycling, it's a hot topic around the city with the new bike lanes that we've had over the last few years being constructed and different routes. Like the Denman corridor is a great example of that. How have you seen biking in Vancouver change, say, in the last 5 years? Like, what are the big things that you've seen, maybe from, infrastructure-wise, and then to also being like adaptation and adoption, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the main changes that we've seen in the last, I would say, 5 years, is the city's focus on building a connected network and recognition that you need connected bike lanes. You can't just have, it's great to have a bike lane here and here, but if they're not connected, it's going to be really hard to get people on them.
Totally.
So I think that's been really big. And also the shift to recognizing the importance of AAA infrastructure, which is all ages and abilities infrastructure, which basically is infrastructure that's separated from cars, not just a painted line. Because most people, a recent study came out that said that 51% of people in Vancouver want to cycle more, but are held back by some barriers. And one of the main barriers is often perceptions of safety and comfort, and AAA infrastructure helps to address that. If you're separated from cars, it's really comfortable. You can trust, that your 8-year-old can ride on there with you, which is really important. We've also seen a big shift, I would say, in the business community as well. The Downtown Vancouver Business Improvement Association is a huge example of that, where back in 2009, when they were building one of the first separated lanes in the downtown core, the Hornby bike lane,
I remember that.
They were officially opposed to the project. But now, fast forward 5-6 years later, and, we partner with them on many things. Good. We're actually going to be announcing an expanded partnership in a couple of weeks. Excellent. They recognize that, in order to keep people moving and coming downtown, you need to have alternatives to driving, or else it's just going to be gridlock. But also it just makes for more enjoyable, people, young people, I think, want to have spaces that are enjoyable spaces to walk. And, we only have a limited amount of public space in Vancouver, and it's not fair to just fill it with cars. People want, pedestrian streets, and they want to be able to bike places safely. So it's really exciting that, to see that shift, to see them now actually advocating for more complete streets and to get more bikes downtown. So.
Yeah, I can only comment to one thing I've observed too. Like at first, I remember when I first moved out to Vancouver, like I was telling you before we started here, around like 2005, 2007, And at that time, it was still in the critical mass stage.
Yeah.
Were you aware of the critical mass
Yeah.
bike movement
Yeah.
and all that?
Yeah.
So they were
Yeah.
like, kind of basically disrupting the systems on purpose to bring more attention and awareness to it.
Yeah.
And it was definitely a polarizing thing. People were very supportive, and also some people were very against it. And one thing I think I see that since that's been dissolved, because they actually, were successful with what they were promoting, that people have kind of relaxed in general, I feel, around it. I think the infrastructure, while it's being constructed, has been a pain for some people. However, now that some of them are wrapping up and it's working for the bikers and it's working for the cars, it's like kind of settling down a little bit and being more relaxed. And now this is a great time for you to be like, well, you know what? Why don't you come and try these amazing new infrastructures we have for biking,
Yeah.
So I've kind of noticed that sort of that shift in just, I think, the general public's, I don't know, tension around it, you could say, because it was kind of a bit more divided. And I feel like maybe now it's kind of coming together a little bit
I
smoother.
think so. And I think most people now, they know someone who rides a bike, right?
Yeah.
It's not like, it's just cyclists versus drivers. I mean, most of us are all, we drive sometimes, we bike sometimes, we walk sometimes, we take transit. And most of us have neighbors or friends or family members who bike, and they're just people who want to get around too. And so, we need to make sure it's safe for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So we've seen some amazing improvements in general for where things are at, but where do you see things going in the future? Like what further developments tends to be improved upon, and in terms of, take that to wherever area you want to take it, but where do you see this evolving in the future?
I think continuing to focus on that connectivity is key. We have a campaign right now called Ungap the Map, because across Metro Vancouver, there are a lot of gaps. And, unfortunately, that can hold a lot of people back, if they can't make it all the way to their office or to where they want to go shopping on a safe route, then they're not going to take it. So, so filling in those gaps, and also shifting to AAA infrastructure, making sure that's the focus and that's what you do first. And also destination streets, I think, is another key thing that's going to hopefully in the next few years take off. We do have a really great network in Vancouver. Unfortunately, a lot of the streets are kind of hidden. I would say they're on, boulevards like 10th Avenue, for example. They're often parallel to the main streets, Ontario Street instead of
So
Main.
what do you mean by destination streets?
So destination streets would be a street where there's shops, coffee shops, restaurants, places where people want to go to.
Yes.
A lot of our bike network is kind of off of the destination streets, which are lovely to bike on.
Right.
They're quite quiet and a lot of people enjoy them. But if your goal is to go shopping, and pick up, go get groceries and then go, look at the shoes and then go here. Go for a float or whatever you need to do. It can be a bit hard. And also for people who are driving, sometimes when the streets, when they don't necessarily know where the bike lanes are because it's not always obvious. And that's a big barrier. I was speaking with someone the other day and she's just like, oh, I don't want to, because she only drives on Main Street and she only sees, the crazy people biking on Main Street.
Right.
And she thinks that's what she would have to do.
Right.
And
Sure. That makes sense.
So knowing, being able to have visible cycling infrastructure on streets that people need to go. And that's part of the reason too why we started Bike to Shop Days, which is now, it's taking place July 21st to 23rd.
Okay.
The aim of that event as well to help people address the barriers of carrying things, panniers and baskets and various things to do their shopping trips, but also help to push for more infrastructure on destination streets like Main Street, like Commercial Drive.
Awesome, yeah.
So that'll help. That'll make a huge difference, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a huge point because right now most of the bike paths or streets are less seen, and someone is like saying, well, I have to go bike on Main Street. Yeah, it can be like there's no way I'm going to do that. It's intimidating. You know what I mean? So if they can show, like, for example, I think a great example right now is the Barrage Street Bridge.
Definitely.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, granted, it's taking forever.
It's going to be beautiful though for pedestrians, for people driving, for everybody.
And I think it's going to really highlight really well.
Yeah.
That element of like it looks very inviting because it looks very safe and structured and functional for everybody.
Definitely.
So kudos on that, even though it's taking a little while, but that's okay.
Definitely. I definitely think too, in terms of in the next few years, we would love to see some more changes to the Motor Vehicle Act as well. So that's provincial legislation.
Okay.
Right now, we're pushing for a safe passing law. I just heard that New Brunswick might actually be voting on that in the next couple of days. We don't currently have a safe passing law. We'd love to see, 1.5 meters that actually by law, you need to give bikes space when you pass them.
Right.
As well as we'd love to see lower speed limits on neighborhood streets.
Right.
So 30 kilometers an hour. And that doesn't just protect people biking, it protects people walking, it protects kids playing, kids walking to school. So I think that's really important, and we'd love to see those changes at the provincial level.
Right.
As
Interesting.
Well.
Yeah, I mentioned, and these things are complicated too, right? Like, I mean, I can imagine from this side of this, like, if the infrastructure for the biking isn't quite there, and we need to give 1.5 meters ideally to pass that biker safely. But yet, then we're crossing into the other lane if you're the driver, and so that's why all these things it's complicated, and they're interconnected in a lot of ways too. So the infrastructure will support these laws and stuff like that. I imagine quite advancedly. So. And then we've kind of mentioned a little bit of this, like some of the different sorts of challenges or reasons that people might be held back into jumping back on their bike and getting into. So what are some of the major reasons you guys have come across of why people have not gotten back on their bikes, and like what holds them back? What have you guys noticed?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like I mentioned, there are, everyone's kind of situation is a bit unique. And they often, even small barriers, can really add up. They often kind of stack on top of each other. So it is important to address the small ones as well as the big ones. But some of the biggest ones, concerns about safety, I think is a big one still, which is why, improving infrastructure is key. But also perception sometimes also about what you might need to bike. Sometimes people think it's a lot more complicated than it is, that you have to have all this fancy gear, and you have to wear like bright yellow everything. And we really try and get the message out that you don't need a lot of it's not the Tour de France biking to work. You can bike slowly and and just like it's not a race. And you often, for shorter trips, under 5K, you can usually just wear your regular work clothes. And it's really not a very complicated thing. But we do also, education is still really important. We do think it's important. We'd love to see to address these questions. We'd love to see all schools in Metro Vancouver, for example, have education. Currently, a lot of them do it, but it's a bit on an ad hoc basis. We'd love to see it mandated, part of the curriculum, so that kids learn young, the rules of the road, but also tips for cycling to school, and then become, hopefully they continue to bike as they grow up, but also for adults as well. I think it's important to have that education.
Absolutely. No, for sure. And I wonder, and one thing I was thinking about when you were talking there was how, and this I think where the infrastructure will support them even more, of having less gaps and stuff. It's like people think, well, now I got to wake up an hour earlier because it's going to take me longer. But can you maybe address that? And is that kind of a myth, you think?
So we actually organized an event as part of Bike to Work Week. Just last week on Wednesday, we organized an event called the Rush Hour Challenge.
Okay.
So we had 10 teams, including actually the mayor of New Westminster and some councillors and teams from Van City and TransLink. And basically what the challenge was 3 colleagues had to leave from the same location anywhere in Metro Vancouver and try and get to downtown Vancouver for 9 a.m.
Okay.
One of them was on transit, one of them was biking, and one of them was driving. Okay. So the goal was to see who could get downtown fastest, basically, and also more enjoyably and more affordably. But the main thing was to try and break that myth that cycling is slower. It actually more than half. So I think it was 6 people cycling got there first, 4 people taking the SkyTrain. We were close to a SkyTrain station, and just 1 driver that actually arrived before everybody else first. Wow. Because when you factor in traffic, you factor in trying to find parking, and all these little things, it's actually often, especially during rush hours, often faster to bike, which is really interesting. And I think a lot of people are starting to understand that, the convenience of it. And obviously having safer infrastructure makes it even more convenient. But yeah, I think that's definitely a myth that a lot of people. The person coming in from New Westminster, obviously, that's a long ride.
Yes.
The person taking transit did get there first.
Okay.
I think the person cycling beat the person driving though in the end. It took them an hour and 15
Wow.
to cycle. He was quite, he does it regularly.
Right.
He's quite, fit. But even for, coming in from some of the suburbs, sometimes from Burnaby, Richmond, it can be faster to bike, which I think surprises a lot of people. And there's new things too. A lot of people, we're seeing more and more people getting e-bikes, electric assist bikes.
Yes, those are so cool.
They're super cool. And they're great if you have a longer commute as well.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. I mean,
Yeah.
I can totally attest. I mean, I'm a driver. I drive. I live in North Van, and I'm kind of all over the city in different ways, and I move quite a bit during the days,
Totally.
and often carting things around. So, but don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to make an excuse or anything, but I mean, I can totally attest to like these times where not only do I see bikes just whizzing past me while I'm sitting in traffic, but I'll see people walking who pass me. I'm like, and I catch up to them. I'm like, oh, that's a little defeating, you know what I mean? So I think there's definitely something to that. And as things improve, as you guys keep making progress with your movement, I can only see it improving.
I think so.
Getting into these gap zones and having this a nice smooth, carefree, safe trajectory to work would be really pleasant, probably.
Yeah, definitely.
Super cool.
Yeah.
So we you mentioned New West and Burnaby, people actually reaching out there. So it's cool to hear that you guys are out there. So do you see this movement picking up more in the suburbs too? Like traditionally we think of suburbs are like way out there. They're so far away, and like our cities are built up on driving and all that kind of stuff. But what are you guys seeing out in the suburbs? Are people actually kind of adopting it even out there?
It has been increasing. I mean, it's a bit more of a challenge, obviously, if people have longer commutes. But we have seen some really, great infrastructure improvements. Cities like Maple Ridge. I think I just saw something in my inbox about Port Moody doing some new improvements. City of Surrey actually does have bike education for all their elementary school students, which is amazing to see. And they are starting to invest in some more and more infrastructure projects. Surrey is going to be growing substantially in the next 10 years. So, they're trying to build for that and encourage people because, again, they can't have everybody drive in Surrey. Yes, we have been seeing, a lot. There's still a lot of work to be done, but we are seeing more and more of the municipalities around Vancouver also see what Vancouver has done and be like, oh, okay, maybe we should do this too because it's working. Yeah.
And I mean, I'll see too, like a lot of people, like now that these bike lanes have been more, set up and everything, there's a lot of people are getting into it. Like there's a lot of cyclers now. I mean, Vancouver's always been heavy cycling I'm from Ontario. So just seeing that difference from Ontario, like near Toronto to here is like, wow, there's a lot of bikers. But even since I've been here now the last 10 years, even more so. And I think that pays homage to the work that, organizations like Hub is doing and the city on board and just those movements. I think it's definitely working. So
we've definitely, I mean, in the past few years, we've seen in Vancouver alone more than a 30% increase, in cycling. It's the fastest growing mode of transportation. Now about 10% of all trips to work are made by bike in Vancouver, which is really high.
That's significant.
It's huge. And I think, we can continue to increase that quite a lot more because there's a lot of work to be done. So it's exciting. And I think I'm excited for the next few years.
Yeah. And our students, you find, are getting into it as well? Like, I mean, you kind of mentioned like you want to see curriculum more around it in the schools. But
definitely.
Others, whether it's like, younger students or even university students, like, is that
Yeah, I mean, Bike to School Week, for example. I mean, Bike to School Week, we mainly do it with elementary school students. We had 100 schools in Metro Vancouver register, and really amazing teachers encouraging, full bike racks at a lot of schools, which is really exciting to see, even across, not just in Vancouver, but in a lot of the other municipalities as well. And university students too. I mean, it's always a bit of a challenge when your university is, not in the downtown core, up a giant mountain, like Burnaby, it makes it a little bit harder to get students. But I mean, I think a lot of students are realizing, because it's affordable and convenient, that they want to get around by bike, and things like the Moby Bike Share, Moby by Shaw Go Bike Share, really helping as well to get all kinds of people riding.
And for those big, for the big mountain climbs, that's where you get those electric bikes. I've actually tried one of those like electric assisted bikes, and they are so cool. Like you can, every pedal is like they take a percentage of the load off. Yeah. And then there's even like a button that if you don't feel like pedaling for a little while, you can actually just push the button and and you buzz along. It's such a cool piece of technology. And they're expensive, but when compared to a car, it's not even close. And so it's, you don't have to be, Lance Armstrong here to get involved. Like, there's a lot of options out there. So that's really
There's
cool.
even, I think, Momentum Mag recently launched e-bike library.
Oh, interesting. Cool.
I think on commercial, and you can actually basically take out an electric bike to try, I think, for a week.
Cool.
See if you like it,
Nice.
and then
Test
return
drive.
it, test drive it, and see if
Yeah.
it works for you. So
Test
I think
drive.
that's really cool.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And then so bikes, they're not super complicated, but they do require some maintenance, obviously, like to, tires and chains and grease and gears and all that kind of stuff. So do you guys supply like resources for bike maintenance and bike care, or do you have anything like that you can
We do.
support people with?
Yeah, we do. I mean, I do know how to fix a flat, but I typically go to the bike shop when things, I'm kind of like, eh. But yeah, a lot of people want to learn how to fix their bike. And sometimes, that can be a barrier too. It's a really small thing. And then, they get a flat tire and then they don't bike for a while because their tire's flat.
Now
So
it's just hanging in the garage.
now it's in the garage, flat tires. So we do offer courses. So we do
Cool.
workshops.
Oh,
we go
wicked.
into workplaces and we'll do beginner bike maintenance, for example, as well as intro to commuting for teams or for any sort of organizations. And then we also do at community centers as well. So we have different courses, including bike maintenance, where people, if they are interested in that and learning a little bit how to, clean their chain and check their brakes. And otherwise also during Bike to Work Week, we have kind of free bike maintenance throughout the week
Right.
at a lot of different events. So it is a good time to come out and
Cool.
maybe have some help if you need it.
Have you found, like in terms of bike safety, that so we're seeing more and more people biking now, but have there been I guess on a relative scale, has with the new infrastructure and maybe the more slightly more harmonious relationship between bikers and drivers, have you seen like on a relative scale like bike accidents decrease, like even despite like more and more numbers?
They have
biking?
actually.
Cool.
Yeah, actually
That's huge.
what's really interesting is that actually kind of the top two things when it comes to safety, the most important things, number one is infrastructure. So if you want to reduce injuries, build safe infrastructure. And the second thing is actually something called the safety in numbers effect, which has been kind of shown in multiple cities.
Right.
Basically how it works is as you get more people cycling, the injury rate goes down just across the board. So just the more people that you can get on bikes, the safer it becomes for everybody.
Interesting.
So it's really interesting. And it's mostly because, cars become a little bit more aware of people biking. They check their blind spots more.
Right.
They, they just, so that's why. And it's so that's why also getting people events like Bike to Work Week are so important to get people riding, because that in turn, makes it safer for everybody.
Totally. That makes a lot of sense. Like I know one of the tricky things when you are driving and you're turning, so there's the bike lane to your right and then say I'm turning right.
Yes.
That is a tricky one because, well, I mean, I'm in the habit now when I see that bike lane next to me that I check the bike, because that is a tricky one, because typically most right turn lanes when there's no bike lane, you're pretty free to go. There's no car there because you're right on the right lane.
Yeah.
But now that there's a bike lane, you need to check that because we're not used to crossing a lane when we turn right, but now we're crossing a bike lane.
Yeah.
So that's probably one of the biggest ones that I know I personally have had to face, and I'm sure is, I could see that being one of the probably most common areas of accidents, I bet.
Yeah, it is. I mean, right hooks. Also, we would love to see more. There have been some, campaigns like from ICBC. We had actually, I just noticed the VPD actually put out a really nice sign on Dunsmuir this whole week asking people driving to watch for people cycling, which is really positive. But we'd love to see ICBC, for example, do even more because a lot of these bike lanes as well came in recently, and people who drive, don't necessarily know what the green box means because it didn't exist when they got their license.
Yeah.
So we'd love to see, for example, when people renew their licenses, to include, educational materials and additional information for people driving, so that they're aware of what, these new infrastructure, how to navigate them, because I think that'll help as well.
Well, let's capitalize on this opportunity. What does the green box mean, and how do we work in that?
What does the green box mean?
Yeah.
Do not park in the green box. Yeah. So basically, how the green box works is that it's supposed to be a safe space for for bikes that are, for example, turning left,
Yes,
or
okay.
just to kind of, get ahead of the cars so that they're
Right.
not stuck in that kind of squeezy zone on the right, like you
Gotcha.
mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
So technically, if you're in a car, you should stop before the green box.
Gotcha.
And then bikes are allowed to pull in front.
Okay.
And kind of get a head start there.
Cool.
Yeah. And also sometimes they're also for something called the Copenhagen turn, where a lot of people, for example, don't feel comfortable doing a vehicular left, pretending to be a
Yes.
car and just kind of going through traffic.
Right.
So instead, you just go straight, you kind of turn,
Yeah.
pull in the box, and then you can go straight again. And that's a way of
Gotcha.
turning kind of left, but on a 2-point,
Okay.
in a 2-point way.
For the biker.
So for the
Okay.
biker.
That
Yeah.
makes sense. Cool.
Yeah.
No, that's good. I mean, you never know because, I mean, you're right. If you got your license, say, 10, 20 years ago,
Yeah.
we didn't have green boxes back then.
Yeah,
We didn't know what they were. And
exactly.
it's like, oh,
Yeah.
I don't know. This looks like they just want to paint the road green or something.
It's so pretty.
Yeah, it's like grass, but not. No.
Yeah, totally.
Cool. So, I mean, and we know too, like, biking is not just for commuting to work necessarily. There's probably a lot of pleasure riding that we can do in the city.
Yeah.
So, we're going to kind of wrap this up, but I want to ask you, like, what are your maybe top 3 rides in Vancouver? Maybe commuting to work rides, but also pleasure rides. Like, what are ones that you just like, man, this is just a fun one to go on, or really scenic, or just really smooth even? Like, what are your top 3 kind of rides?
Yeah. Oh, good question. I really enjoyed, actually, I love Carroll Street. So
Carroll
even
Street.
biking here, Carroll Street,
Yeah.
I think it's because, I've spent some time living in Europe, in
Okay.
Copenhagen.
Yeah.
And Carroll Street is really a great example of a complete street.
Cool.
With bike lanes on either side,
Nice.
kind of raised with sidewalk. And I really enjoy Carroll Street when I'm coming here. I also, everyone, the seawall. Who doesn't love cycling around the
Totally.
seawall
Classic.
in terms of a classic? Obviously there's the weekend recreational rides, but also I love when I can, go to meetings and kind of like sneak in a bit of the seawall
yeah.
on my way to a meeting, because it's just, it's beautiful,
Right.
right? And what a nice way to,
Totally.
after lunch, go for
Yeah.
a little ride around. But there's also, some great routes outside of Vancouver as well. I do enjoy, recently I had to go to a meeting out in Burnaby, and I took the Central Valley Greenway, which kind of cuts straight across, and it's quite nice. And actually a lot of it as well is under the SkyTrain line and kind of
right.
covered from the
Yes,
rain,
I've
which
seen
is
that
kind of
one.
cool. I think it was raining. I was like, this is nice.
Perfect.
Yeah, I don't know. I like, I bike a lot, and I
Cool.
like most routes, but I do try and, I don't usually go on major streets, for example.
So we got Carroll Street, the seawall, and
Yeah.
then the Central Valley Greenway, you
Yeah.
said. Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, if you haven't tried them, folks, go for it. Go for
Yeah.
a nice little ride. Awesome. Is there anything else coming out that you want to make sure people are aware of at all that we haven't covered yet?
Yeah,
today?
I guess just in terms of upcoming events, obviously Bike to Work Week still happening,
Yeah.
but upcoming events, Bike to Shop Days, July 21st to 23rd. You can register on our website at bikehub.ca. But another really cool event that we're hosting is called Bike the Night. So it's taking place on September 16th.
Cool.
We're expecting 5,000 to 10,000 riders. It's going
Whoa.
to be kind of Vancouver's first really large, fully permitted night ride.
Okay.
We're encouraging lots of people to put lights on their bikes. There's going to be a pre-party with a DJ and free hot chocolate and
Nice.
snacks and bike decorating and body paint and all sorts of really cool
Cool.
things. So really just to kind of, celebrate. We have a really, a lot of people on bikes in Vancouver, and we'd love to see even more. So it's kind of a fun way to just get out and ride your bike. And so we encourage people. You can sign up there at bikethenight.ca.
Amazing. Laura Jane, this is awesome. I really
Thanks so much.
appreciate, again, squeeze this in. It is Bike to Work Week, so one of your major campaigns happening right now. You squeeze this in for us, and I think we got to a lot of really relevant information there. I hope it was useful for people.
Thank you so much.
And thank you. So to everyone who joined us, thank you so much for this episode of the Vancouver Survival Guide. So, get on that bike, dust it off, or maybe, trade it in on Craigslist or whatever and get yourself a new one and go test out some of these amazing bike lanes that we have going on and open up. I think you're right. I think on multiple levels, this is a really, really good thing.
Mm-hmm.
And definitely something we're on board with here at Float House and Vancouver Rail. So
Awesome.
thanks again, Laura.
Thank you so
Appreciate
much.
it.
Yeah, thank you.
And
Nice to
until
meet
next
you.
time, folks, thank you, and we'll see you soon.